Hello and welcome to this panel of the digital divides. You can experience it right now yourself. We are divided by screens rather than enjoying this panel discussion together in the same room. The pandemic has shown that especially in the workplace environment, the digital divide has grown. Inequalities have come to the surface that concern the access to technology, tools, or even a fast and stable internet connection. This is why we have decided to focus the next 30 minutes on talking about the digital divides in the workplace. It is my great honor to introduce to you our 4 panelists of this session. First, we have Sabine Diwan, who is the President and Executive Director of the Just Jobs Network. Then we have Harald Kaiser, who is the chairman of PwC Europe, who will give us a bit more of an economics perspective of why this digital divide in the workplace came to pass. Then we have Sayed Munir Khasrou, who is the co-chair of the G20 TF4 Digital Transformation and also the chairman of the Institute for Policy, Advocacy and Government. And then we will close our little introduction round with a look and can do to not let this digital divide gap grow in the workplace by Maria Chiara Carossa, who is the lead co-chair on the T20 TF4 Digital Transformation, a professor of industrial bioengineering at the Biorobotics Institute of Scuola Superiora. My name is Stefanie Söhnchen. I am the head of digital strategy at the PR agency Fleischmann-Hiller Germany, and I'll be your moderator for this session. I would like to invite you to use our hashtag, which is hashtag GSS2021, to be part of this discussion. Also, you can use the chat to join into our panel discussion, and afterwards we invite you to a discussion with our panelists that will be posted in the chat. Now, Sabina, can you start us off with giving us a bit of context of what has happened to let this digital divide in the workplace grow in the last weeks and months?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Stephanie. And of course, to the hosts for inviting me here today to be part of such an important summit like the Global Solutions Summit. I'm very happy to have been part of it for several years now. So let's start in the present, where countries around the world are battling the effects of the pandemic, obviously in terms of health, but also in terms of their respective economies and labor markets. As of January, 93% of the world's workers were experiencing some form of workplace closures. The ILO estimates that a loss of working time equivalent to just under 5%, which is roughly about 130 million jobs worldwide, were disrupted because of the pandemic. Against this backdrop, technology is proving to be both an advantage as well as a disadvantage. So on the one hand, we know that technology is enabling various forms of interventions, from contact tracing apps to actually advancements in education technology that are allowing children to continue to have some form of education from home at a time when schools are closed. But on the other hand, the pandemic is also exacerbating the divides that technology was already fostering before the pandemic. And the pandemic is accelerating technology in a way that is leading to even more unequal outcomes. So the first thing that I do want to emphasize on this is just the importance of the policy and the role of policy in regulating the impact of technology. Let me just take you very quickly through some ways that the digital divide is being worsened now in the face of the pandemic. First, of course, we know that the digital divide exists between the global north and the global south. On many levels, the global north have both the human capital as well as more sophisticated kinds of technologies that allow them to capture higher value-added activities in value chains. Another example of the global north and their being ahead in terms of technology is children in the global north that have better access to technology and skills needed, than in the global south. But there's also a growing digital divide within countries. And in many countries, in many developing countries, children have now remained home for the better part of 2 years, trying to keep up with their schoolwork on cell phones. And if you have, one parent with one smartphone and 3 children, you can imagine what that looks like. So, let's be clear that the long-term trajectories of these children are being affected. Even if we bring the pandemic under control, even if we think about regulation now, we're looking at the impact on these children for years to come. And finally, the last sentence I'm going to say is just the exacerbation of the gender divide as well, and the unequal access that women have to technology in terms of hardware, to digital skills, and this inequity of access between men and women, that is also something that is being exacerbated by the pandemic and is a world that we're looking at and challenges that we're looking at for years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabina. So Harald, the why from the economic side that I promised at the beginning.
Yeah, happy to do so, and thanks for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to be in this forum. So I think economically, all of that is driven by 2 megatrends. And number one is the inequality across the world. So Sabina already said that. Not only inequality in societies, not between only emerging markets and leading industrial markets, but also inequality in the business world. The winner currently are the big tech companies, and these are strongly dominated currently by the US and China. The other mega trend, what I see are the technology breakthroughs. The speed of change have been much faster than anticipated. Every single business in these days needs technology. And technology transformation is necessary in the area of customers, of production, of back office activities. And we see that big platform companies are so successful with their global business model due to technology. And with the right digital infrastructure and the right educated workforce, you can really rule the world in these days. And these 2 megatrends, inequality and technology breakthroughs, are accelerating each other. And the pandemic has even accelerated this process. And why do these 2 trends, which are accelerated by the pandemic, now really create this divide? And there are mainly 2 reasons again. So number one is the technical infrastructure. So the first level of digital divide. We see from a global perspective that the pure physical internet access is still a huge issue. Roughly 40% of the world's population is still offline. In some of the African companies, it's up to 80%. And people without internet access are being left behind regarding education, jobs, and healthcare. And companies without internet access cannot provide their services. And this leads at the end to social exclusion. The second level, and that's also true for developed countries, is the digital literacy and skills. Not having the right skill sets affects again education, health, and social life. But it also affects how people can deal with a new changing work environment. It's foreseen that we will see that many jobs will be disappear and replaced by others, by new jobs which are driven out of the digital economy. But only those people have a chance to adapt to this new environment if they have the right skills in the digital age. And the current infrastructure for education in the area of upskilling is not sufficient in order to cope with these issues.
Thanks for giving us some more context and structuring it with the reasons. I think that was really helpful. So Monir, you wanted to have more of a policy view on this topic with talking about what can we do now?
Yeah, thank you so much, Stephanie. First of all, it's a pleasure to be joining my fellow panelists, and thanks to the organizers for inviting me. And I and Maria, we both are working on the task force on digital transformation, which she is leading. I'll quickly touch base on 3 issues why G20 is important and relevant in this discourse. Secondly, some of the gaps which already Sabina and Harold has highlighted, and some quick policy measures which we'll be recommending to the leaders when they meet in Italy in October. First of all, if you look at the G20, of course, 20 most powerful economies of the world, and this group alone represents more than 90% of global GDP, more than 80% of global trade, and more than 90% of e-commerce. And in this group, we have advanced economies like US and Japan, and we have some of the major developing economies like India and Indonesia. Now, having said that, some of the digital divide, which is yawning, the danger is during the transformation, if we don't consciously address this gap, then we might head towards a decade of social instability and economic disruption. Just quick numbers. Number one, if you look at now, within the developing economies, access to internet is only 35% for the population. If you compare it, 18% more for developed economies. And Sabina already alluded to the gender gap. I mean, for women globally, access to internet is 12% less compared to men. Then also you have child and youth, people below the age group of 25. And in the developing economies, it's only 13% compared to 80% plus for the developing economies. So we are dealing with a very abnormal situation. Now, having said that, what does the G20 have to do? No, there is not only gap within the G20, there's gap beyond G20. And what we would hope the leadership, when they're coming to meet in October, post-pandemic, one of the most important summits, one of the things would be to sort of shore up efforts to help developing economies sort of adopt the digital transformation in a manner that's sustainable, inclusive. And 2-3 sectors would be very important. As you know, in developing economies, public sector plays a huge role. Most of the jobs, goods and services, public sector, to help the public sector adopt the digital transformation. Second would be sustainability. We already have seen artificial intelligence is doing wonders in terms of tracking, responding to natural disaster, providing access to renewable energy, then energy efficiency system. Education is very important. Even as we speak, more than 2 billion school children don't have access to internet. So we need to upgrade the skill curricula. We need to make digital tools, digital literacy inclusive. And also job and employment, which already Sabina has highlighted, also as Harold. So I look forward to sharing more insight during the panel now. And I think that will be my more or less take in the first 3 minutes. I hope I'm within time, Steph.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant, and I like that you are coming with a clear plan of what to do in the autumn. I'm sure we can elaborate on that later. Now, our closing look into the future of this introduction round by Chiara. What can we do to not let this gap grow in the future?
Thank you very much, Sabina. I have this difficult and critical part because I am part of the Industrial Revolution and the fourth Industrial Revolution because I am roboticist and scientist and bioengineer, and I am also part of the T20 task covering digital transformation and also trying to elaborate on policy brief for the G20 in order to provide some specific policies to address inequalities and to address all imbalance that the distribution of the digital power can cause to people. So I try to cope my scientific background with the impact of the different solutions and revolutions that we are providing to people. And first of all, I can say that for science, this is an opportunity to be part of the industrial revolution, of the digital transformation, but also to invent new ways of training and educating people in order to cope with this transformation. Second, I think that we have to develop some specific technological tools that are compatible with the environment and not to provide to the by means of the digital transformation more unsustainability because of the energy consumption which is related to the digital transformation. So we have to take into account that every digital transformation has an impact on the climate change. So we have to invent a new digital transformation compatible with the environment. This is an important point to me as a scientist. And then we have also to remove gender gaps in entering into science and technology. So to elaborate on specific measures and policies in order to engage engage female students and female graduates into digital transformation. Also, I want to say that we think that automation is somehow in contrast with jobs, because automation can be a sort of antagonist of the human employment. But we can also see that automation can have different meanings, because automation means that robot can do some tasks that are unpleasant or unsafe for humans, for example. So in jobs, in manufacturing, sometimes we use robots in order to avoid that human beings are involved in a very dangerous task. And this is an important point that sometimes is not taken into account. Second, the automation also can provide more effective way of assisting humans. So to me, robotics and digital transformation can also be seen as something that support human labor. And I think that I am open to discuss with people about that and answers to questions on these specific issues.
Thank you so much. I think one point that you all touched upon was the gender inequality and also the education and literacy that has to happen. So it's quite shocking numbers that you mentioned, Munir, on this issue as well. So maybe we can spend some minutes on discussing how we can increase digital literacy and close the gender inequality gap when it comes to access to the internet and using digital technologies. Who would like to go first?
Would you like me to respond?
Yes, please.
No, I mean, gender and workplace, I think Sabina can highlight more given a specialization, but on a broader scale, what needs to happen, I'll give a simple example. If you look at job displacement, even within the G20 community, by 2025, almost 50% jobs in US will become sort of displaced because of automation that's happening all across the sector. It's 70% for India. Now, in India's case, almost 12 million women will lose jobs by 2030, and a significant portion coming from agrarian sector. Now, what do you do with that? One of the key challenges is to upskill, reskill, and we need to have a very well thought out strategy. Even in a country like, say, like Bangladesh, which is heavily dependent on ready-made garments, and 90% are women workers, one factory automation displaces 500 women with no transferable skill set. So one of the key elements would be skill set development and also capacity building, investing heavily on evidence policy. So those are 1, 2, 3 quick take I would put in terms of looking the broader picture. Into more granular detail, I think probably Harold and Sabina can step in, because one week's a corporate perspective, and Sabina has been working quite a bit with women and employment. Yes.
All right, Sabina, do you want to add something?
Sure. No, thank you. And thanks for that, Munir. I absolutely agree with everything you just said. I think the first step, Stephanie, is to really recognize that these gaps actually exist, right? I think pervasive in the literature and in many of the policy conversations we have is this assumption that women have the same access to technology and skills as men do. And, 46% of women in low and middle income countries do not actually have access to mobile internet, for example, right? So there are these inequities in terms of access to technology and skills, which has to be the starting point for policy to begin with. Then, of course, these gaps are narrowing, but they still exist. Then, of course, I agree with Munir, there needs to be better equitable investment in skills for men and women. But I would take that a step further and say what we are seeing is, certainly enrollment rates, gender parity in enrollment rates, but still low enrollment for women in skills and TVET training programs. And what's even problematic on the demand side, right, is the fact that women are still relegated in the labor markets to low value add jobs, or they don't, if they get the job in the first place. And there's this very dangerous view, pervasive, and this is the last thing I'll say in my view, in my opinion, a very dangerous view that, the the advent of technology is creating new opportunities in gig work for women to work from home, which is both a blessing but also a problem, because we actually don't want to relegate women to just doing handicrafts and micro tasking from home. We actually want women to get out into the workplace, which means still working with employers in order to create, bathrooms, lighting, safety, anti-discrimination, anti-sexual exploitation, an environment that's to women actually having equitable opportunities and outcomes in the labor market.
All right. So from the audience, I got a question about automation, but Harald, if you want to say something about the gender topic, you are free to respond.
No, so it's not only about gender. It's in general, I think we need governments and the business leader who work on that. So the speed of change and the technology breakthrough does not allow to rely on the traditional education system, and that's independent how good it is. So therefore, also business has to step up and say that we will care about our own workforce. We have to create own upskilling programs. We have to make a kind of strategic workforce analysis. What do we need? What do we have? Where are the gaps? And that includes gender gaps, but also from blue, white collars, different regions across the world. And what I think it's also a possibility for a new chapter of public-private partnerships, really to create also learning platforms and to set up joint curricula where business is supporting the more government purpose of bringing education to the population, and where with these kind of efforts we can recouple society and business.
That sounds really interesting. So there's more partnerships building on different levels across different areas of industries. That's really fascinating. So maybe coming to the automation topic, because I feel, Chiara, you are very passionate about that, and also the audience wants to know something. The question I got was, with automation, would you say that industrialization is still a right development path? And if not, what is the alternative?
Oh, okay. This is a very difficult question. I think that automation is part of the transformation of science into technology, because there is a sort of push from the work, from the manufacturing process that is addressing towards making automation of some repetitive, boring or dangerous task. So automation is not really dangerous per se. Of course, every automation means that some jobs must be redesigned and redefined according to the new manufacturing process. So industrialization is part of our scheme. We think that we make products, and industrialization today means something different from the past, because today we have some different processes and manufacturing systems that are providing less mass products and more customized products because of what we can do today. But what my point is that sometimes automation means to support people. If you think to rehabilitation or personal assistance or cognitive support, we can provide some assistance to people instead of thinking to replace people at work. We can also support people in aging, people with disease, with people with chronic problems. And this is my point. And today, if we see consumer robotics and the evolution of consumer robotics, we can see that today robotics is seen as something that supports human being in at home or in entertainment or in therapies or similar. So, and also I want to add that digital transformation has enabled us during the pandemic to educate people at home, to provide service at home. So we cannot see that digital transformation is dangerous. Digital transformation is enabling us to stay together. So it is something which is positive. What we have to address is the negative consequences of inequalities, provided that the different access to digital means and digital tools. And so we are developing policies in order to support people to have access, to have education, to have training, and to have long lifetime training for addressing digital skills.
Definitely. So I really love this notion of support. Monia, do you want to answer that?
Yeah. I mean, just to add to what Maria was saying, you see, the thing is, as of today, 30% of that work we do, 30% is done by machine. And within 2025, it will be 50%. So it's not a question of that the inevitability of automation and transformation. It's a question of how do we respond to that. And two things are very vital. One is we live in days, any skill set that you have a shelf life of maximum 3 to 5 years. So it's a whole lifetime learning and relearning if you are to be in the job market. So gone are the days when you have a particular skill set and specialization and the rest of your life is happy and peaceful ever after. So that is something, a conscious psychological sort of reminder we have to give ourselves every day. And some of the creative things also opening up, creative arts, literature, civil society, where robots, fortunately, may not have a headway. So those still are areas where humans will continue to dominate. So the challenge will be how do we open up the new sphere of creativity and still one step ahead of machines. Humans will always be one step ahead of machines. Question is, how do we continue making, and there where people like Maria continues to play an important role.
Harald, what do you think? Do companies have a problem with this attitude of the lifelong learning? Don't they always expect the finished product from their employees?
Fair question, and I don't think that this is currently the case, and that business has to adapt to that, and that due to the speed of change is accelerated over the technology breakthroughs in the last years. And therefore, the concept of long life learning is so much important, and it's much more important than it was some years ago. And therefore, also companies and business have to change their behavior, that they do not start with a workforce which is then able to fulfill all tasks the entire lifetime, but that you have to change. As we, as individuals, have to change, companies have to change their education process and their way of bringing new knowledge into the workforce dramatically. And we see that this is now starting and happening. Some are better than the others. But if you ask me whether everybody is already at the stage where they want to be, definitely not.
So maybe Sabina, to tie this off, you are researching and working in the area of strategic workforce development. What are the things that you are seeing that are already moving us into that direction of supporting this new attitude?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer to that, Stephanie, is I'm not seeing enough. So just to pick up on something that Harald just said, absolutely. Harald was talking about the unprecedented speed of technological change. And to that, I would just add that we know it's not just the speed, but it's also the unprecedented magnitude of technological change, right? And both the speed and magnitude of technological change are moving at a rate that is much faster than the ability of institutions, whether they are government, whether they are businesses, whether they are grassroots organizations, or even households or individuals, right? Much, much faster and much greater magnitude than the ability of all of these entities to keep up with the change. And to this point, I think I absolutely agree with Maria, who's been just an incredibly articulate voice in this discussion. I think that technology in itself is not dangerous, but what is dangerous is how it manifests itself in very unequal ways and exacerbates existing inequalities. And so, as the world of work changes, and one of the big changes in the world of work is just the concept of a job, right? We're actually now breaking up jobs into tasks, into part-time work, into remote work. So our whole notion of what it means to have a job is now changing. And as that happens, we need a new framework, policy framework, business framework, grassroots framework to think about how to manage these changes.
Okay, let's take some of our remaining seconds to just quickly make one demand about the divide in the workplace where you say this needs to change right now. Munia, I'm sure you have something.
No, I think one of the things we also have to keep in mind while we talk about technology automation, it will be very myopic to lose sight of the social dimension, because the 15 top jobs which are under threat because of automation involve marginalized groups. So we need serious labor market reform. We need overhaul of the redistributive mechanism so that during this transition, people are not left out of job in the kind of situation we have seen populism and in other parts of the world, Europe and other world, that doesn't, sort of show up again. So that would be my take on the social dimension of this technological issue.
All right, we are out of time for this session. Thank you so much for your contributions. Remember, you can go to the chat with our panelists after to have a bit more of a Q&A session. I am really grateful for your time and all your insights, and I wish you all the best. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I hope to see you again. Auf Wiedersehen.
Thank you.